So this is an interesting question, actually. Because I treat all my water with drops balance, I don't actually really do reservoir changes, except when I'm changing from veg to flower because there's a dramatic shift in the concentration. And actually, I do also growing nowadays, but when I get in with my hydroponic growers, this is where I guide them to, is let's say, for example, they have a 10-gallon reservoir and they put nutrients in there. Well, I tell them to get, they are going to have to top back off with 5 gallons of water. Well, I tell them to check the parts per million of the water. And let's say we're doing our best to keep the parts per million at 1,300 parts per million, and 5 gallons of nutrients, water is gone, and they check the parts per million and it's risen to 1,400 parts per million. Well, I would tell them to add 1,200 parts per million of the next recommended week's nutrients, right? So if they're in week 4 or 5 in the flower and they say, do you want to use this much of part A, this much of part B, blah, blah, blah. Well, mix up 5 gallons of nutrients, but make it sit up at around 1,200 parts per million, and then make sure to add the drops of balance, and then give it to the water. The water should come out to being around 1,300 parts per million, and the water never goes bad because drops of balance keeps water clean. It removes heavy metals, it oxidizes, so it's like constantly keeping high oxygen content in the water, so no bad bacteria can exist in that water content or in that water. And this is how we're able to save nutrients, because we're not doing reservoir changes every week and all this other crap. We're just staying at a certain parts per million level, and we're adjusting the amount of concentration of phosphorus or potassium or magnesium or whatever micronutrients are in the bottles based upon whatever we get in veg or into flower, but we're really hitting a certain level of parts per million. And the drops of balance, because it's trace minerals, it's never going to allow the macronutrients to bind together, causing high salt content, because the trace minerals and having that variety is what keeps the salts from building up. Yeah, it keeps salt deposits from happening, which is a big deal around excess phosphorus and potassium issues in hydroponic systems. Hey everyone, you're here with Mark on Perfect Gardens TV. So just invited Matt back on the call because I had a question for him. And we always have great conversations. And this stems from a question from one of our customers, because talking about pH drift, and pH stands for possible hydrogens. And so my question to you, Matt, is does pH drift throughout the week in a reservoir, possibly because the water is unstable and it's losing its hydrogens, or is it because it's capable of absorbing more CO2 from its environment?
Okay, so first, pH is potential hydrogen, which means
what did I say?
You said possible, but that's okay. It's more about whether it's positively or negatively charged. So positive hydrogen would be known as an acid, and that would be electricity. And then the negative charge would be the OH negative, which is what people say, you want in your water, OH. So when you have pure water, well, let's start with minerals first. Minerals are either alkaline or acidic. They can be dissolved in acid. Not all minerals will be dissolved, but for the most part, the metals become salts through acid, which is becoming positively charged with hydrogen. Now, we're talking about pure water. Most scientists will say, or if you look into it, it should be a perfect 7 pH based on there being no charge there, negative or positive. And what you have with pure water is when you add a charge to it, that's a stable charge, especially minerals. Minerals have charges. Minerals or elements such as copper can not only hold the charge, but they can transmit the charge. Where water does not hold a charge, it can hold the things like salts that actually hold the charges and react to it. So when you have pure water, the pH can be affected more dramatically than if you had water that had, say, hardness to it, which would be your calcium, magnesium, like natural well water would have a hardness to it. Most well waters that have hardness have an alkaline pH because of the level of calcium that is there. When you have a pure water versus, let's just use like a hard well water, the pH can be affected much easier, more dramatically in the pure water than it can in the hard water. In the hard water, it'll depend on the amount of hardness, the amount of minerals that are present there that can be used as pH buffers, like calcium. And in order to drive that pH down and stabilize it less than 7, you would have to add enough acid to equalize the amount of calcium that's there, the buffer that's there for pH.
Let's explain a couple of those real quick there, and tell me if I'm correct on this. The calcium is normally because of like lime, and as it breaks down, CO2 gets released, and that increases the pH, and so that's why you want to increase on the
no.
Right?
The calcium itself is alkaline, and calcium is actually one of the easiest dissolved minerals because of the neutralizing effect you have with acid. It's very easy to dissolve with acid. In fact, it's one of the first minerals that dissolve, and you don't need a lot of heat, or you don't need a lot to do it. You just need to add the acid. So when you have your water, and this is why you'll see it fluctuate. Let's say that you brought the pH down, and then it starts to rise back up. That's because the amount of acid that you added did not fully equalize the actual calcium. So as the acid reacts with the calcium, it then charges that calcium as like a dissolved calcium. Like, for instance, vinegar would create calcium acetate. Or if you have phosphoric acid or sulfuric acid, each one would create the form of acid that you added, like calcium sulfate, phosphoric calcium. Those are acids that dissolve that calcium. So depending on the type of acid you add is the type of calcium you'll get. But when that runs out, so if you have, like, let's say today you added a certain amount of acid to your reservoir, there's a certain amount of calcium there. Let's say you added lime or whatever. The CO2 really has nothing to do with the reaction of the calcium between the calcium. More than likely, the CO2 is just going to gas off into the air or create some sort of gas that's released into the atmosphere. So when you're dealing with the calcium, it actually attaches to that acid. Once you've reached the pinnacle of the acid to calcium ratio, if there's any calcium left, it'll continue to drift that solution back to alkaline until that alkalinity has been neutralized by the acid. And once you've achieved that, which may take several days, then you should have a more stable pH.
Very interesting.
When you're testing the pH, if you first freshly add acid, most of the acid's still going to be there, and that's why you're seeing the pH drop. But as the acid interacts with the alkalizer or the alkaline element, it then neutralizes it, and it becomes calcium acetate or whatever it may be. And until all that calcium has been neutralized or dissolved, the free calcium, the pH will continue to drift up. So you have to keep adding acid, and you could probably do it throughout a 24-hour period as long as you're measuring it every 6 hours or 8 hours.
So then when adding in the drops balance, the reason why the drops balance makes the water, as people report back, so it keeps the water, it helps the water become more stable. The reason why then is because all of the minerals in there are sulfate minerals. And so they're really strong acids that take a longer time for those minerals to break down versus a weaker acid that would be broken down quicker in reaction to the calcium and other minerals that are in that water, from whatever water source they're using. Is that a better way of explaining that?
Well, of course, yeah. I mean, obviously, when you're adding mineral acid, it's going to have an effect like that. I mean, vinegar is a good example of that. Vinegar, obviously, you don't want to use too much of that. That could cause adverse effects. Where using plain sulfates give you what the plant wants, and also trace elements that help in many ways that, science still hasn't figured all that out, but we all know that trace elements help in many ways for all living organisms. So you have a double whammy effect when it comes to drops of balance.
So when you say potential hydrogen, you were talking about the electrical charges in the beginning. Just circle back to that to finish your thought out on that before we wrap it up.
You have positive hydrogen, right? So that's your plus. That would be just hydrogen plus, which hydrogens are your protons, right? So in an atom, there's central charge. Remember, in an atom, you only have protons and neutrons. You don't have electrons. Electrons are your oxygen. That's your negative charge. And so on the outside, you have protons and electrons that marry each other. And so when you get into chemistry and you get into this idea of acid or base, you're really just talking about the charge potential. So when it says potential hydrogen, it's saying the potential charge of hydrogen. Is it in the positive or the negative? And your negative would be an OH negative. So you'd actually have an electron neutralizing that, and then also a negative charge that would cause the opposite effect, the opposite of what you would call a positive charge or an acid. So when you have acid, you have a lot of positively charged hydrogen, which is electricity.
So how is that in relation to sulfate?
Just so I can reiterate this, sulfuric acid by itself is known as an electrolytic solution. So we're talking about electricity.
It creates its own hydrogen through the electrolysis of water.
Yeah, I mean, that's what you're seeing being released in the atmosphere. That's where electrical storms come from.
That's what creates the honeycomb shape.
Well, yeah, that's what maintains that shape is the positive hydrogen. Absolutely. Yep. I mean, when you're looking at ionizers, what they're doing is they're running the water through an electrical charge.
Absolutely. Right when you said
the water responds to the electrical charge, but the water does not hold the electrical charge. That's why after it goes through, it loses its so-called structure, right? And they say, well, drink this water within 12 or 20, whatever they say, because it loses all of its negative ORP. And negative ORP, so you have what's known as oxidation reduction potential, is a lot like pH in a sense that it's negative and positive is on the side of acid and negative is on the side of alkaline when it comes to oxidation reduction potential. In nature, we have a positive, a healthy natural waterway would need like a 400 ORP. A 400 ORP would have the potential to, keep anaerobic bacteria at bay, as well as keep oxygen available for aerobic life, which is your healthy bacteria versus your anaerobic bacteria. And also, fish and everything else can thrive in that environment. That's, the same thing a lemon would do. Lemon is a 2 pH, 3 pH lemon juice. When you add it to water, it gives you a positive ORP. That's why
it's a natural preservative.
Yeah, vinegar as well. Vinegar is also in a positive ORP, and it's also an acid.
That's what stops the bad bacteria from molding up on our food. So that would make
and we're not making claims. We're not make claims to kill bacteria. I'm talking about positive charge versus the negative.
We're talking about lemon. We're talking about vinegar right now.
Well, let's do it an example. If you went into nature and you find a freshwater system that's much higher than 7, it's not going to be a very healthy system. In fact, E. coli, coliform parasites thrive in an alkaline environment.
Just to make this connection real fast for everyone that understand that, again, we can't make claims, especially around bacteria with drops of balance, but we can make connections.
Talking about the science.
I'm talking about the science, and you guys can make your own conclusions to this. So if you add lemon, it's known to be a natural preservative for your food. And we're talking about the science of why that works, right? It creates an environment where bad bacteria can't exist in that environment. Well, that same science would hold true to water as well. If we create that same type of environment, that's what we're discussing, right? When it has a high oxygen state environment, the bad bacteria can't take hold into the environment. Is that basically what we're talking about right now, Matt?
Well, we're talking about the electrical charge, the positive versus the negative. It's ultimately hydrogen versus oxygen and how they interact with one another when it comes to elements in water. And the charge is really, is it acid or is it alkaline? That's the electrical charge, right? And a healthy soil, in a forest floor would be around a 5.6, which is acid. That's because it's electrical, it has life. And even your soils at home, you don't want it above 7. That would be death. And where you find alkaline soils would be like deserts. And very few plants and only poisonous plants really can survive in deserts. Nothing really edible. And that's why your cactuses and your sagebrush, those are all poisonous too. Okay. Mild, some cactuses you could probably get the water out of whatever, but there's still a level of toxicity that comes with alkaline soils. Whereas in your acidic soils, that's where you get life. That's where you get lushness. That's, you can grow produce, you can grow trees and all kinds of different things. I mean, blueberries, for instance, need 5 pH soil a lot of different plants have a range, but for the most part, we're in that the positive electricity, which is your acid. And that's really what I want to point out. That's why an environment that's in the forest floor doesn't get overburdened with bacteria, because it has this electrical charge that keeps that from happening. It's your skin. Your skin is a good example, and everybody has rubbed their feet on their socks on a carpet and touch someone and you shock someone, or you touch a doorknob and you shock a doorknob. That's your skin actually is a 5.6 pH. So you're actually exciting all the electrons, you're creating some sort of friction, and your positive pH, your acid skin, gives you the ability to transfer that electrical charge. And so that's what you're actually seeing when you do that. And your skin also keeps you from being able to be infected by bacteria because of the pH. That's your protective layer. You have about an inch layer from your skin that's a field. It's an electrical field. And that charge, that's why you don't have to actually touch the person. You can get within that inch and the charge will transfer. But that's your skin pH versus a forest floor pH. And just to give you a better understanding of what that pH is actually maintaining is an electrical charge. And that's what I want to, really point out. And what is electrical charge? We're bioelectric beings. Plants are bioelectric beings. Animals are bioelectric beings. So that just gives you an example of, what the pH really means in terms of electricity, in terms of positive versus negative.
Matt, I appreciate you jumping on for a few minutes and discussing this conversation. We always have, I'm never afraid of asking you an oddball question, because you're always, helping to search for the question that I'm really trying to ask, right? And we find it together, and then we really seek out the answer. And I appreciate you for these moments. And I'm gonna go ahead and release the content to the channel and see what type of static electricity we can create from it. Have a beautiful day, brother.
All right, thanks for having me. Have a good one.
You too, bro. Peace.